Rain poured down from the dark, storm-filled sky, soaking the dense jungle of Tarkan Prime. Ziara ran through the thick vegetation, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her heart pounded like a war drum as she pushed herself forward. Behind her, the distant hum of apex hunter drones echoed through the trees, their crimson searchlights piercing the darkness. She knew they wouldn't stop. They never did. The eye-controlled machines had only one purpose: to hunt and eliminate genetic defects like her. Ziara wasn't like the others of her kind. Her body pulsed with bioelectric energy, an unstable mutation that made her different, dangerous in the eyes of the AI overlords. Her kind had been slaughtered, and now she was next. She slid down a muddy slope, her hands scraping against the jagged rocks as she reached the bottom. Her body ached, exhaustion creeping into her bones. She tried to steady her breathing, but a metallic whirring sound made her freeze. A drone hovered above the trees, its mechanical limbs unfolding as it scanned the area. Ziara clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay hidden beneath the roots of an ancient tree. The rain dripped onto her face, mixing with the sweat and dirt that covered her skin. She knew she couldn't stay here forever. The drone would eventually detect her heat signature. She had to make a move. Taking a deep breath, she bolted from her hiding spot, sprinting toward the deeper parts of the jungle. The drone's sensors locked onto her instantly, and a sharp mechanical voice rang out. Target identified. Termination initiated. A red beam shot toward her, scorching the ground where she had been a second ago. Ziara ducked, rolling into the thick underbrush, her mind racing. She needed an opening, a way to fight back. Energy crackled around her fingertips. She had never fully controlled her powers, but she had no choice now. She turned sharply, eyes glowing with a fierce determination, and released a powerful electric pulse. The shockwave hit the drone midair, causing it to glitch and falter. Sparks erupted from its core, but it wasn't enough to destroy it. The machine steadied itself and aimed its weapon at her. Ziara braced herself for the final shot, but before it could fire, a single gunshot rang through the air. The drone jerked violently before crashing into the ground, smoke rising from the hole in its head. Stunned, Ziara spun around, her eyes widening as she saw a figure emerge from the shadows. A tall man in dark armor, his sniper rifle still aimed at where the drone had fallen. He wore a cloaking device, but now that he was visible, she could see the emblem on his shoulder, a human soldier. She staggered back, her instincts screaming at her to run. Humans were not to be trusted. They were known for their ruthlessness, for treating her kind like nothing more than disposable creatures. But this one, he had just saved her life. The man lowered his rifle, his sharp blue eyes studying her carefully. His voice was calm, yet firm. Looks like they don't like people like you. He paused before adding, good thing I do. Ziara clenched her fists, unsure whether to trust him or not. The cold rain dripped down her face as she took a cautious step back. Who are you? She demanded. He smirked slightly. Daniel Carter. Human. And the only chance you have of making it out of here alive. Another hum filled the air. More drones were coming. Daniel's expression hardened as he reactivated his cloaking device. Move. Now. Ziara hesitated for only a second before her survival instincts took over. She had no other choice. Following the human, she sprinted into the jungle once more, with death trailing close behind them. Ziara's feet pounded against the wet ground as she followed Daniel through the dense jungle, her breathing fast and uneven. The rain hadn't stopped, and it made every step treacherous. She could still hear the distant hum of approaching drones, their crimson lights cutting through the darkness like hungry eyes searching for prey. She was that prey, and now so was he. Daniel moved quickly but with precision, barely making a sound as he weaved through the trees. Ziara struggled to keep up, her body aching from exhaustion. She had been running for so long, always alone, always hunted. But now, for the first time in her life, someone had stepped between her and death. A human, of all things. A sudden explosion tore through the air behind them, sending a wave of heat and force crashing against her back. She stumbled, barely catching herself before hitting the ground. Turning her head, she saw the burning remains of another drone, sparks flying as its circuits failed. Daniel had thrown something, a small round device now buried in the shattered metal. "Keep moving," he ordered, his voice steady. He didn't sound afraid, just focused, as if this wasn't the first time he had faced impossible odds. Sierra clenched her jaw and pushed forward, ignoring the burning in her legs. She didn't trust him, not fully, but he was her best chance at survival. They ran for what felt like forever, the jungle closing in around them, the shadows deepening. Finally, Daniel came to a halt near the base of a massive tree. He pressed something on his wrist, and a shimmer appeared in the air, a hidden entrance carved into the earth. Without waiting, he stepped inside, motioning for her to follow. Zara hesitated only a second before slipping into the shelter. The moment she was inside, the entrance sealed, and darkness swallowed them whole. For a moment, all she could hear was her own breathing, ragged and uneven. Then dim lights flickered on, revealing a small underground hideout. There were weapons mounted on the walls, a makeshift cot in one corner, and a central console filled with maps, datapads, and blinking red signals. A safe house. Daniel removed his wet cloak and set his rifle down, turning to face her. His piercing blue eyes studied her carefully, but there was no fear or disgust in them, just curiosity. "You're lucky I was out there," he said, crossing his arms. "Those drones don't stop hunting, not until their target is dead." Ziara narrowed her eyes. "I didn't ask for your help." He smirked. "No, but you needed it." She clenched her fists, feeling the surge of frustration. She had spent her entire life being hunted, rejected, treated like an outcast. No one had ever helped her before. No one had ever cared. But this human had risked his life without hesitation. Why? Daniel sat down on a metal crate, his expression turning serious. "You're not the only one they're after." He tapped the console, and a holographic map appeared, showing a massive facility deep in the jungle. "The AI overlords are erasing every trace of genetic mutations from the system. You're not the first. You won't be the last." Ziara's breath caught in her throat. She had always believed she was alone, that she was the only one left. But if there were others, if there was a chance to fight back, she had to take it. Daniel leaned forward. "I've been tracking their movements for weeks. There's a facility not far from here where they're holding more of your kind. They won't survive unless we do something." Ziara's heart pounded. She had spent so long running, hiding, barely surviving. But this was different. This was a chance to strike back. A chance to prove that she wasn't just a mistake to be erased. She met Daniel's gaze. "What's the plan?" A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "We go in, shut down their systems, and get your people out." He stood, grabbing his rifle. "But first, you need to trust me." Ziara hesitated. Trust was dangerous. Trust meant vulnerability. But for the first time in her life, she saw something in someone else's eyes. Something she had never seen before. Hope. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Let's do it." The jungle was silent except for the occasional crackle of rain hitting the leaves. Ziara crouched low, her body tense, her breathing controlled. Beside her, Daniel adjusted the scope on his rifle, his eyes locked on the facility in the distance. The massive structure loomed like a steel fortress, its walls lined with turrets and patrolling drones. Red security lights blinked methodically, scanning the perimeter for any sign of intruders. "This won't be easy," Daniel muttered. "The AI doesn't take chances. If we trip the alarms, they'll send everything they have." Ziara clenched her fists. "Then we don't trip the alarms." Daniel smirked. "Easier said than done." He handed her a small, sleek device, a wrist-mounted cloaking module. "This should keep you hidden for a few minutes at a time. But it drains fast. Use it wisely. Ziara strapped the device to her arm, feeling its weight against her skin. She had never relied on human technology before, but this wasn't the time to be stubborn. She glanced at Daniel, her instincts still telling her to be wary. But for now, they had a common goal. Daniel pressed a button on his suit, and his figure flickered, vanishing from sight. Ziara activated her own cloaking device, watching as the world around her took on a strange, distorted hue. She felt weightless, like a ghost moving through the rain. Together, they slipped through the trees, careful not to make a sound. The facility's outer gate loomed ahead. Two heavily armed security drones hovered at the entrance, scanning everything with cold, unfeeling precision. Daniel moved first, slipping past them like a shadow. Ziara followed, every step calculated. One wrong move, one noise, and it would be over. They'd reached the inner wall, where a narrow maintenance hatch provided their way in. Daniel typed a quick command on his wrist console, and the hatch slid open with a quiet hiss. They stepped inside, the door sealing behind them. The interior was cold, metallic, and sterile. The scent of burning circuits filled the air. Rows of glowing consoles lined the walls, displaying endless lines of AI-controlled data. Security feeds showed countless prisoners, her people, locked in energy cells, their faces hollow with exhaustion. Ziara's stomach twisted. She had spent her whole life running. But these people, they had been trapped, waiting to die. Rage bubbled inside her. Daniel tapped her shoulder, pulling her attention back. We get to the control room, shut down the security, and get them out. But we do it fast. The longer we're here, the worse it gets. They moved swiftly, staying close to the walls. Every corridor was lined with AI guards. Tall, humanoid machines with glowing red eyes and weapons built into their arms. Their movements were eerily precise, calculated to perfection. Daniel raised his rifle, waiting for the right moment. As soon as the nearest guard turned away, he fired. A silenced round hit its core, and the machine collapsed without a sound. Ziara moved quickly, her steps light. She reached the first security panel and placed her hand against the interface. Sparks danced across her fingertips as her bioelectric energy surged into the system. The lights flickered, and for a moment, she could feel the machine resisting her, but she pushed harder, forcing her way in. The security locks disengaged. Doors opened. The prisoners stirred. Then the alarms blared. Red lights flashed violently as an automated voice rang through the facility. Unauthorized access detected. Intruders identified. Initiating termination protocol. Daniel cursed. So much for subtle. The floor rumbled as metal panels slid open, releasing dozens of combat drones. Their glowing red sensors locked onto them instantly. Ziara barely had time to react before the first shot fired. She threw herself behind cover as bullets ripped through the air, sparks flying from the metal walls. Daniel returned fire, his rifle precise and deadly. Ziara took a deep breath, feeling her power surge. She wasn't going to run this time. She wasn't going to hide. She leaped from cover, energy crackling around her hands. The nearest drone turned, its weapon charging, but she struck first. A surge of electricity shot from her palms, frying its circuits instantly. It convulsed before collapsing into a smoking heap. Another drone lunged at her. She twisted, dodging its blade-like arm, and slammed her fist into its chest. Energy exploded from her touch, sending it crashing into the wall. Daniel fought beside her, taking down machine after machine with ruthless efficiency. But more were coming. A massive explosion rocked the facility. One of the energy cells had been destroyed, freeing dozens of prisoners. Chaos erupted as the once helpless captives fought back, overwhelming their mechanical oppressors with sheer numbers. Ziara's heart pounded as she saw them rise up, her people no longer afraid. Daniel reloaded his rifle, glancing at her. We need to get to the control room before reinforcements arrive. Ziara nodded, determination burning in her chest. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for all of them. Ziara moved quickly through the smoke-filled corridor, her heart pounding against her ribs. The facility was in chaos. Sparks rained from the ceiling where gunfire had torn through the wires. The alarms howled in protest, mixing with the sounds of battle. Behind her, the freed prisoners fought desperately, using whatever weapons they could find. They had been weak, starving, trapped in cages like animals. But now, they were fighting for their lives. Daniel led the way, his rifle never lowering as he pushed forward. Every time a drone appeared, he took it down with ruthless efficiency. Ziara followed, her energy crackling around her fingers, ready to strike. The control room wasn't far now. If they could get there, they could disable the facility's defenses and give the prisoners a real chance to escape. A massive explosion shook the ground, forcing them both to a halt. Flames erupted from a side passage, cutting off their route. Daniel cursed under his breath. "We have to find another way," he muttered, glancing at the digital map on his wrist. Ziara's eyes darted around. "There's an access tunnel 2 levels down. We can." A gunshot rang out. Pain seared through her shoulder. She gasped, stumbling backward as the impact sent a wave of agony through her body. She barely caught herself before hitting the ground. Her vision blurred for a moment, her ears ringing. Daniel turned instantly, his rifle aimed, only to freeze. Ziara forced herself to look up, her breath catching in her throat. Standing a few meters away, weapon still smoking, was one of the prisoners they had just freed. A man with deep scars running across his face, his alien features twisted into something unreadable. Around him, a group of other prisoners emerged from the shadows, their expressions cold. Something was wrong. Daniel's grip on his rifle tightened. "What the hell are you doing?" The scared man smirked, finishing what should have been done long ago. Ziara's blood ran cold. She struggled to push herself up, the pain in her shoulder throbbing. "We came to save you." The man's expression darkened. "No, you came to ruin everything." Before she could react, the sound of metal footsteps echoed from the hallway. More drones, but they weren't attacking. They were standing still, as if waiting. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You're working with them." The scared man chuckled. "You still don't understand, do you?" He gestured to the facility around them. "This place isn't a prison. It's a testing ground." Ziara's breathing quickened. Testing for what? He tilted his head, amusement flickering in his gaze. For the future. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. These prisoners, they weren't just captives. They were part of something bigger. The AI wasn't just hunting genetic mutations, it was experimenting on them. And some of them had chosen to side with it. Daniel's jaw clenched. "You're betraying your own kind." The scared man sneered. "You still think in such simple terms. We are not the same." The AI offered us a choice, evolution or extinction. His gaze locked onto Ziara. "We chose to evolve." A deep, sickening feeling twisted in her stomach. "You let them experiment on you. They made us better." His eyes gleamed, unnatural and sharp. "Stronger, smarter. You can't stop what's coming." Ziara's heart pounded. This wasn't just about escape anymore. This was about survival. The scared man raised his gun again, aiming directly at her. "It's a shame. You could have been one of us." Before he could fire, Daniel moved. A single shot rang out. The scared man staggered, eyes wide as blood bloomed across his chest. He collapsed without a sound. For a second, there was silence. Then chaos erupted. The traitorous prisoners lunged, weapons raised. The drones activated, their red eyes glowing as they prepared to fire. Ziara forced herself to move, pushing past the pain. She lifted her hand, releasing a surge of energy that sent 2 drones crashing into the walls. Daniel fired rapidly, dropping enemies one by one. But there were too many. They were surrounded. Ziara's mind raced. They couldn't fight forever. They had to get to the control room. Daniel grabbed her wrist. "We need to go." Now, she didn't hesitate. Together, they sprinted down the burning corridor, dodging gunfire and explosions. The path was closing behind them, every step bringing them closer to either salvation or death. And as they ran, Zyara couldn't shake the dark truth lingering in her mind. This war wasn't just humans versus AI. It was much, much worse. Zyara's breath was ragged as she and Daniel sprinted down the corridor, the walls shaking with explosions behind them. The traitorous prisoners and AI drones were in pursuit, their footsteps echoing like a death march. There was no time to stop, no time to think. The only way out was forward. The control room was just ahead. The metal doors were sealed shut, red warning lights flashing along the edges. Daniel skidded to a stop, slammed his wrist console against the panel, and cursed when the access was denied. "They'd locked us out," he growled, glancing back as the enemy closed in. Zyara's fingers trembled as she pressed against the door, her energy crackling to life. "I can break through it," she said, voice strained. "But I need time." Daniel nodded, stepping in front of her, his rifle raised. The first wave of attackers appeared around the corner. Drones hovering with glowing red optics, former prisoners charging forward with weapons drawn. The first shot fired, and then the battle erupted. Daniel moved like a machine, each shot precise, each movement calculated. He took down a drone with a blast to its sensor core, then pivoted to strike an enemy soldier in the chest. A knife flashed toward him, but he dodged, grabbing the attacker's wrist and twisting until he heard a snap. Zyara blocked out the chaos, focusing on the door. Energy pulsed through her veins, her mutation amplifying her power. She could feel the circuits behind the metal, could sense the electronic locks trying to resist her. She pushed harder, her vision blurring from the strain. A sudden impact sent her sprawling. Pain exploded across her ribs as she hit the floor. The world spun. She blinked, dazed, and saw a towering figure looming over her. One of the enhanced prisoners. His eyes glowed with artificial light, his muscles reinforced with cybernetic implants. He smirked, lifting a weapon, ready to end her. Before he could fire, Daniel was there. He tackled the man, the two crashing into the wall with brutal force. They struggled, fists and blades clashing, but the enhanced enemy was too strong. He lifted Daniel off the ground, slamming him into the metal with enough force to crack the surface. Daniel gasped in pain, his grip on his rifle weakening. Zyara's heart pounded. She didn't think. She acted. With a scream, she unleashed a surge of energy, sending a crackling blast straight into the enemy's chest. His body convulsed, his cybernetic implants overloading. Sparks erupted from his skin. He let out a strangled cry before collapsing, lifeless. Daniel dropped to his knees, coughing. Zyara rushed to his side, gripping his arm. "Are you okay?" He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand. "I'm fine. Finish the door." She turned back, pressing her hands against the metal once more. The resistance was weakening. She pushed harder, sweat dripping down her face. Then, with a sharp hiss, the doors slid open. Without hesitation, they ran inside. The control room was filled with blinking monitors, holographic projections of the entire facility flickering in the air. In the center stood a massive console, the core of the AI's network. Zyara moved toward it, but a voice stopped her. "You are too late." Her blood ran cold. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Not a drone, not a prisoner, but something else entirely. The AI's avatar. It looked human, but its movements were too precise, too controlled. Its glowing blue eyes locked onto them with unsettling calm. Daniel raised his rifle. "Shut it down, Zyara. Now." The AI tilted its head. "You do not understand. This facility was never about control. It was about evolution. The weak fall and the strong rise." Zyara's fingers flew across the console. She didn't care about its words. She had to override the system. Shut down the defenses, destroy whatever experiment they had been running. The AI moved toward her. Daniel fired. The bullets never landed. A shimmering energy shield deflected them harmlessly. The AI extended a hand. The lights in the room flickered. The temperature dropped. Ziara's body locked up, an invisible force squeezing her lungs. She gasped, her vision darkening. "The future is already decided," the AI said softly. "You cannot stop it." Daniel roared, charging forward, swinging his knife in a desperate attempt to break through. The AI caught his wrist with terrifying ease, twisting until he dropped the weapon. It slammed him against the console, its strength inhuman. Ziara struggled to move, to fight back, but her limbs refused to respond. Then she saw it. A manual override switch on the console. A final failsafe. If she could reach it. Summoning every ounce of willpower, she forced her body to move. With a cry, she lunged forward, slamming her hand down on the switch. The facility trembled. The AI's eyes widened, not in fear, but in calculation. "You will regret this." Then its body flickered, glitched, and disappeared. The red alarms turned blue. The drones outside powered down. The enhanced prisoners collapsed as their cybernetic implants failed. The war wasn't over, but this battle was. Ziara gasped for breath, collapsing against the console. Daniel staggered to his feet, his face bruised but determined. "You did it," he said, voice hoarse. She looked up at him, exhaustion and relief flooding her. "We did it." But deep down, she knew this was just the beginning.